Hey, Rentals Club members, thanks for joining us. Today I'm with Rohit Taparia. Rohit brings us amazing insights about the short-term rental market in India. He's not just somebody who's looked into it from a distance, he's actually been a part of it for a while, especially as an entrepreneur. So we're going to learn a lot about how the market is structured, what he's done in the market, and we'll also be talking about the trends right now. Obviously, COVID-19, just like anywhere in the world, has really impacted the market. But I think he's got really great insights about understanding better the situation and what people can do. And last, we'll also be talking about perspectives for Rohit and how you can contact them. Without further ado, Rohit, hello, how are you?
I'm very good, Thibaut. First off, thanks for having me on the show. I must admit that I am an avid reader, and I really like what you guys are doing, and how informative and analytical your sort of platform is. So thanks so much for that service, first of all, and doing fantastic. Of course, it's been tough in India in the recent past, but things are getting better. So hopefully that upswing continues.
Hmm. Hopefully so. And thank you for your good words. And so, it's, I think the value of Rental Scale Up is also in the people we can bring, or the talents we can put some light on with our little lamp we have. And it's also I'm very curious to hear more, because we have usually data about the US or data about Europe as well, but huge markets like India sometimes are completely overlooked, and that's such a shame. So many things are happening there in terms of market, of tech. It's not a big secret that there's things happening there, but there's not like what is happening. So without further ado, Rohit, I mean, as I said, you are pretty well placed to be talking about the short-term rental market. Maybe can you share with us what you've done in the past that's connected to the industry?
Sure. So, first off, Thibaut, I think what you said is absolutely accurate. It's a fascinating sort of world, and in many ways, it's interesting because you sort of watch trends that have happened in the West and the East, which are leaders in the travel space, and India is sort of evolving in its own way to a new normal way of traveling, a new normal way of experiencing things. So it's quite interesting to just understand that side of the consumer space, and it's a fairly large country as well, so it's interesting to see how things play out across different segments in the industry as well. So that's absolutely the case. I'd love to talk more about that. Quick background on me: I've in the recent past helped set up villa rental business in India, which is again it's a very trendy sort of offering in terms of like where India was historically. But what we do is we run a company called Lahono Stays. I've been a part of the founding team. I helped set up the company as well, and we take over villas which are of a certain standard. So we're trying to cater to luxury sort of travelers, but we take over villas all over the country and then rent them to groups of people or individuals that are looking to either use them for a short holiday, or in the recent past, trends have been to use them for longer stays, work from these locations, spend more time with their families there as well. But it's a very interesting space, and I've been lucky enough to help set up this business and help watch it grow. And it started off, maybe 3 years back at a time when the Indian consumer wasn't really aware about villa offerings, so they were more used to traveling to hotels. Whereas today, watching how customers, sort of want to use this mode of accommodation as a preferred mode for most of their travel, it's been a fascinating 2-3 years as well from that standpoint.
It's very interesting. What's the was there a tradition of vacation rentals in the past in India? How was it like renting? Because in a way, I mean, in the world didn't start with Airbnb, right? Like in Europe, for example, people have been renting out, a little chalet or a little house by the sea for decades. So what was maybe the trend in India? Did people rent out places on I don't know, in close to big cities or in the mountains or by the sea, or it was not something that happened? And who are the big actors at the moment?
Yeah, so it's interesting because India historically, and when I talk about historically, I mean like even 5, 7, 8 years back. So it's recent past stuff. But India is a place where 99% of people, I would say, travel to hotels. Those hotels get split into two kinds. One is the larger sort of, bigger chains, which have 200, 300, 500 keys at some point that are being rented. And then you have the smaller boutique properties, which have maybe 10 keys, 20 keys, 30 keys, maybe 50 keys at a time. And so the industry gets split into those. Um, the larger chains typically get used for business travel, so that's been the trend that historically India has seen. And the smaller chains used to get used for like experiential travel. So you might go to, let's say, a wildlife place in India, or you
Mm.
might go to a place that's close by to a really nice sort of beach. And you might look to go for a more boutique sort of offering in terms of your holiday, just because you prefer that for that specific trip of yours. But this has been what India is about historically. So the villa rental space is, I think, a trend that started maybe like 5, 6 years back. It is a very different space in India than it is in the West, because, as you rightly said, Airbnb made this space really popular. But what happened in India is that the key difference is that people are so used to service that the traditional Airbnb model didn't really work too well, because at home you are used to having staff, or
Mm.
most people are, or at home you're used to having a cleaner or someone who performs some service for you. So to go on a holiday and then do everything yourself, even make your own tea or coffee, just seems like you're reducing, the quality of your lifestyle for that holiday. So that's maybe like a the social aspect of why the traditional Airbnb model maybe wasn't as popular when things first started. But then as you layer on this service element to this short-term sort of space, that's when customers really started coming in and wanting to experience these offerings.
I think it's really fascinating because a couple of weeks ago we talked with Daniel Roquette. He's the head of Villa Finder, which is a big um, villa rental agency across Asia, and we're talking about a market that I know, which is Bali, and how obviously Bali is still closed at the moment we're recording this. Bali is still closed to foreign travelers unless they come with a business visa, and basically a lot of the market had to shift from welcoming, say, Australians or people from Singapore, or to welcoming people from the capital city, Jakarta. And exactly as you said, in Indonesia, I mean, if you welcome people from Jakarta, they actually expect a lot of service. They also become with their own maid and chauffeur, by the way, because they come with their own chauffeur. So you also have to host the chauffeur, by the way. And also they are expecting a lot of service, way more than probably these other guests had. So it means in the same property, suddenly you have to switch what your service level is and a lot level of demand just to adapt, for example, in this case, to the domestic market. So it is very, very interesting because it's something we've noticed as well. So
Sure.
so people adapted, I guess, probably. So now, what are like a few names of companies that are make this model work in India at the moment?
Yeah, so there's a few players. There's us. We operate in the more high end side of the spectrum. So the type of properties that we take over, they typically are properties that you would equate to, let's say, a 5 star or 7 star offering. Then there's other players. There's a couple of other companies that do this at a fairly large scale. One is a company called Vista Rooms. Another is a company called Saffron Stays. They're fascinating models, very interesting what they've done. Managed to tie up a lot of supply as well in terms of the offering that they have. And they have a large audience, and they've been doing this for the last few years. And in the recent past, what's very interesting, and another trend that we've seen, is that some of the biggest hotel companies, from across the world, not only in India, they are also looking to get into the space and add villas as an offering to their audiences. So I think this trend, or what we're calling a trend, perhaps is the way forward for the industry for a certain type of travel, right? Like maybe for group travel or maybe for more private travel, where there's demand for that. So yeah.
Rohit, before we move on to trends at the moment, I would like to mention one name, which is Oyo. Why am I
Yeah,
mentioning Oyo? Because, for example, if you're in Europe and you know the name, the brand Oyo Vacation Homes,
for
you
sure.
associate basically Oyo with people who have hotels, but also in Europe do vacation rental homes, or especially vacation rental homes, because they're quite basically Netherlands-based company where they have brands like Bell Villa, for example. Um, in India, does Oyo do vacation rentals at all? At least not the same way, because now from what I get from your viewpoints, that's not a model that actually exists. So, are there even a name in terms of vacation rentals that counts in your
Yeah.
country?
Yeah, so it's a very different name. I think Oyo. First of all, I have to say that they've really done a fantastic job of I would say white labeling what was a very disorganized sort of industry and space. There were so many smaller hotels operating in a fashion where you didn't know what you were going to get when you sort of went to them. So I think first of all they've done a fantastic job, but in India, they are not what they are in Europe, in the sense that they don't really have vacation homes that they rent out, but rather they have hotels which are 50 keys, 100 keys, 200 keys at a time that they rent out at a average sort of price of somewhere around 2,000 rupees, maybe about I don't
Mm,
know, 15, $20 a night, sort of $20, $25 a night, $30 a night sort of offerings. And I think in Europe what happened, and you'll know better, Thibaut, but they I think acquired a company which had a lot of product, and they got into that space through doing that, but they obviously don't have that yet in India. Let's see.
very interesting. So, talking about the market then, we had questions from actually a reader of Rental Scale Up. So I'm
Okay.
going to use his questions, so the questions basically are. It's Amit's question, sorry, and so I wanted to name him.
For
Um,
sure.
so first, obviously, just like a lot of countries, right? India is badly affected by COVID-19. Um, what do you think is going to happen? I think things are improving a bit. I think health-wise. How do you see the trend right now?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, thanks for that question. And I think it's a fantastic question. It's right on the money in terms of, what we should be talking about. So I would, and we're obviously, like as a company, we are in touch with a lot of travel experts. We're in touch with a lot of travel agents that sort of operate in the country, and their livelihoods depend on, travel and what's happening. But what I've seen and what I've heard, Thibaut, is that you would have to break this answer up into three different parts. So there's three different segments for travel in India. One segment is business, and that I would say yes is really badly affected because the combination of software like Zoom together with COVID-19 spreading so rapidly, especially in crowded places, has meant that people aren't traveling to other cities and places for business. So naturally that sort of hotel offering is running much lower in terms of their occupancies. They were running quite bad at the start of the pandemic. Then things improved in between the first wave in India and the second wave, and things again got bad in March or April. So I do think that that segment has been affected, and maybe in the long term, the travel that they used to get, the business hotels, the travel that they used to get for leisure sort of tourists, that might go down even further, because the second segment that people sort of look to travel for is experiences, more boutique sort of offerings, right? It could be wildlife, it could be something around food. So that segment actually has done quite well. So if you look at what happened, and I'm excluding like government enforced restrictions on travel because you just can't travel then. But besides that, user demand was there and people want to experience things. The trend in the last few years has been that people, now think about spending more money on experiences than saving money in India. So that's a fairly interesting thing to have happened as well. And so I'm seeing this segment doing fairly well. And then the third segment is the segment that we are in, which is the villas and what I would maybe call alternative accommodation, perhaps. But this segment of travel is doing the best because whether it is a lockdown or it is business as usual, people have realized that they can work from anywhere, they can live anywhere. They want to spend time with their loved ones because they've realized the value of life itself. And I'm seeing that in this segment, there's a huge uptick. So it's quite interesting. But the largest publications in India and the world are now covering more alternative accommodation type of offerings. Recently, we got featured in an article that Condé Nast did, for example, where they highlighted the 50 best villas in India, and they spent 3-4 months, scouting around the country and looking at the best accommodation. And even though as a company we only rent in 3 locations, Lohono had 9 villas that got featured in this list of 50. So it was quite interesting to just see that, firstly, from a publication standpoint, there was a desire to feature alternative. And then from a company standpoint, it was good validation to know that, the type of product that we're going after is perhaps the best in the country.
So first, congratulations on that. That's pretty impressive. That's a great achievement. So it does. So this desire for these travel magazines, for example, to feature more villas in this case. So does it talk to like let's say a move from people like moving away, let's say from hotels to homestays, vacation rentals? So that trend is happening, right?
For sure, it's they are now realizing that there is there has been a gradual, I would say, evolution in travel. Even before the pandemic, more and more Indians were getting used to the fact that they want to go to serviced villa offerings for group travel. So it's probably not the best suited alternative for travel if you're just traveling alone, or maybe with like your spouse or loved one. But if you're going with a group of 4 or 5 people, you get your rooms, but then you also get the common spaces and a private pool. So I think people were, okay, and getting more and more okay with this form of travel. But the pandemic has accelerated this, and it's caused a lot more excitement around wanting to experience things that are more unique. And I would say that due to that, perhaps these larger travel publications have started covering this form of travel as well.
And so that's on the consumer side, a lot of demand, I guess, which is good, despite COVID, or in this case, maybe thanks to COVID, more people are discovering that's an ideal format.
For sure.
On the supply side, I guess we talked earlier about the level of service you have to provide, of amenities as well, right? So you have to provide this, and still it's a market that's apparently very let me know whether it's true or not, that it's market that's price sensitive. So how can you have rates high enough to make a profit basically in the end? What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and from a outside perspective, I would say that it's the right question to sort of ask, right? But I thought I'd do some thinking on this and some research in India before we sort of looked at this business as well. And this is a question that we asked ourselves, right? Is there truly a market in India for a high-end sort of player that rents at ARRs that at times touch the best, what the best hotels across the world might be offering? And what we realized very soon is that India is a fairly big country. So the population is 1.4 billion, and it's growing every year. What we also sort of saw is that the per capita income is sort of growing year on year. As a trend, people are spending more on experiences instead of saving money. So everyone wants to have great memories. Like that's what you really remember for the rest of your life. It's not that you saved part of your sort of earnings and that's sitting in the bank. Of course, I'm not saying you shouldn't save, but I hope you get the point that I'm making with that. Lastly, what we realized is that and I don't agree with this necessarily, but there's a disproportionate amount of money and wealth that sits with the top 10% in India. So 80% of the wealth sits with the top 10%, and 10% of India is 140 million, which is around half the population of the United States. So that 10% is a fairly large segment to target. That 10% on an annual basis earns 56% of the income generated in India. And that 10% on a purchasing power parity level has a per capita income of somewhere close to 35-40,000, as per my estimates, $35,000-$40,000, that is US dollars. So first of all, I would just say that it's important to keep that in mind while answering this question, because there is a large enough segment within the country that can afford high-end holidays. Uh, Now, the other way to answer that question is, what about the rest of the 90%, right? And I think we spoke about this briefly earlier, but you do have all kinds of offerings for holidays, starting from, and I don't want to necessarily say that Oyo is bad, but starting at lower price points like Oyo and moving up in terms of segment. And this sort of even exists in the villa space, which is alternative, right? So like some of the other players I spoke about, typically their ARRs would be lower than what ours are, but there's enough, sort of demand that exists to cater, to and everyone to coexist.
Yeah, a very, very good point. And it's, I mean, again, it's something that intuitively you think about, right? India is big enough, has developed fast enough that there's very successful businesswoman, businessman that they would be able to afford this. But thanks to your data, because then it's very clear to actually have like real data on what it is to actually to capture the size of this, and for making translation also in US dollars and parity purchasing power,
Yeah.
it's really important to be able to get a better idea what we're talking about. So still talking about supply side here. So how are things structured? I mean, obviously, I know you're not a lawyer or you're not somebody there, but I'm just trying to understand whether, for example, just like probably have hotel lobbies, not just in the building, but lobbying groups. Do short-term rental associations exist? How do you guys operate in the market to have your voice heard?
It's a good question, and I think it's really important to remember that it's a very new industry, and it's a very new part of the travel industry. This short term sort of travel space. It's only started to be covered by media in the recent past, so it's garnering more and more interest. But historically, India had a body that covered hotels. This body is called the FHRAI, so that's the Federation of Hotel and Restaurant Association of India, and most sort of hospitality companies would fit into their sort of mandate in terms of what they regulated. What we do is very different because firstly, there's only 3 or 4 bedrooms or maybe 5 bedrooms in a single place, and then there's multiple such villas that you have spread across a big city, and then you have multiple cities that you're operating in. So each asset is a fairly small asset in that sense, but it's almost impossible to look at trying to get permissions for each of these assets in a very efficient way with how things are set up today. So what happens today is that we are regulated by states. Each state has a different department that looks at I would call bed and breakfast as maybe more generic sort of term. The way you get licenses is you first apply for various no objection certificates from different departments across states. So there'll be the fire department, there'll be the health and safety department, et cetera, and you have to meet a certain sort of criteria to be able to get those NOCs or no objection certificates. You then take that file of documents and then you apply for local licenses. Together with that, food is regulated by a different sort of body as well. Alcohol is regulated by the excise department. And there's various sort of disconnected bodies that exist within India. So the point I'm making is that I don't think it's necessarily something that is good or bad, and it's a little difficult to just classify as good or bad. But I would say that it's a very new segment within the country, and our job and what we are doing more and more is trying to work with authorities to formulate easier ways to sort of operate within the fairly complex structure, especially since there are so many states within India, and each state also operates in a different sort of way. So it's something we're working towards. It is quite complex today, but I would say the government has been quite responsive and understanding of like this being very different from hotels. So we do have a little bit of leeway that to operate in a more free way. But I think in the near future we will come up with a more structured regulation around villa rentals, if that makes sense.
Okay. So let's keep for today the questions, I think, on things are organized. I think it's already detailed enough. And I think what we can get from that story, that obviously you know the country pretty well, the business really well. And I wanted to first thank you so much for your time today and all the insights. I think
Oh,
it's
thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm really happy to do this, and it's exciting to talk to experts and share thoughts and ideas. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
And speaking of that, of people who may want to speak with you, um, I know that you right now are looking at different opportunities, and also you are looking at things internationally because, given your success right now, you may be ready to step out and go to other markets to I don't know, talk with people and network and maybe work together and achieve success. So if people maybe want to know more about the market in India or maybe interested in working with you abroad, how may they reach you?
Yeah, so I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, and absolutely. I think first of all, there's a desire to keep learning, and there's a desire to keep picking up new things because the space is such a fascinating space. That's really evolving, and I think we'll get back to its glory days in the next 2, 3, 4 months, hopefully. But I think the easiest way is on LinkedIn. My name is Rohit Taparia, and it's probably the easiest way to just find me and connect with me. And perhaps I can share with you, Thibaut, if you'd like, my email as well. If you'd like to post that, and I can, share that my LinkedIn link and my email too, in case that's helpful.
Perfect. So Rohit Tapaya, thank you so much for your time. You put all these things in the article. And again, we put obviously your name in the video so people can easily type this into LinkedIn and find you. Thanks again for your time and you take care.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.